Today we're talking about the giant octopus tattoo design. Welcome back! You might recognize this design from the Understanding Flow video, but in this video we go into much greater detail and share with you the entire process from start to finish. So hit the subscribe button and let's get started. Our client would like a giant octopus, starting from their upper thigh and going all the way down towards their ankle, with the tentacles interacting with certain body parts, like the knee for example. And here I'm doing one of many quick thumbnails, just to try out some ideas. And I'm almost immediately reminded that when you have a tattoo of a large squid or an octopus, you really have to concentrate on getting the tentacles grouped up and moving together. So at this stage, I decide that only 4 tentacles will go down the leg, and the other 4 will wrap around and go behind the upper thigh. So for the purposes of this video, I'll be showing you the design process of capturing the lower 4 tentacles first. The head of the octopus fits nicely with the shape of the upper thigh, and the tentacles can follow the same rhythm as they move down the leg. And these circular shapes can also match each other. And these are just a few of the many ways this tattoo could flow. And at this stage, it's worth trying out a lot of options. But in the end, I move out the tentacles in groups of 2, and use these 2 sections to create an S-curve as it moves down the leg. To help understand this concept a bit better, I open up a human model in Blender, and here I can paint my ideas right on top. This way, I can begin to make sense of the many ways the tentacles could go. I start by painting the flow lines, and I'm thinking of ways to get the tentacles moving in these directions. And after I get a few ideas, I start to paint a few rough thumbnails of the octopus on the model. And I should mention that if you're not designing your tattoos in 3D software, then that is totally fine. This is just an added step to help understand things a little better, but it's in no way required to design a great tattoo. From here, I trim the edges and change the layer style, and even though things are still pretty rough, this gives us a decent starting point to work from. An octopus has a very distinct texture on its skin, and we'll need to study octopus anatomy to make sure we get the details right, like the very unique octopus eye, which is kind of shaped like a rectangle or an hourglass. And I really love the shapes that are made by the webbing on the body. In the final artwork, I want to make sure to have a shading style that really highlights these areas. As usual, our client has provided a lot of images to help explain what they're looking for in their tattoo design, so we'll keep these here for reference and inspiration. I also spent some time generating images of octopi, and I'm paying close attention to the lighting ideas. I want our octopus to have very bright highlights and very dark shadows, and some of these references have really good examples for lighting. Plus, there's some great textures for the skin here as well. Since the octopus exists in the real world, we want to make sure that we're looking at anatomy diagrams. In this way, we can make sure that we're capturing the right details with the eyes and the skin and the siphon of the octopus. Before we get started with painting, I generate a bunch of images of octopus tentacles, cut them out, and then put them into the project. And this way, it's a lot easier to move around these elements and quickly try out different combinations to see what works best. And this was useful because the next step is to start building out our rough composition. In this stage, we're keeping things fast and loose and trying out lots of ideas as we go. And after some quick painting and blending, we're left with something that looks pretty rough. But we can now clean up that composition into something that looks a bit better. So we lower the opacity and begin to paint right on top. Now this pass is not going to be our final artwork, but I do want to cut a lot of the noise out of the rough composition and turn it into something a little more useful for the next phase. And now we have a texture for the skin of the tentacles and for the head of the octopus as well, and a lot more highlights and shadow. Things are starting to look decent, but our tentacles are looking a little too long. The best way to fix this is to make the octopus head larger in the final artwork, so more on that later. And during the roughing process, I like to modify a version of the rough composition so I can get an early picture of how this might look as a tattoo. So I change the layer style to multiply, and use liquify to reshape the outside a bit, and then erase the excess artwork so it sort of looks like the leg is tattooed. We have a good start and we're ready for the final artwork, which we'll be doing on paper. So we create a new project that's the size of a sheet of paper and paste in the rough composition, and we rescale that to the correct size and then lower the opacity down to about 10%. Then we print out these 3 sections, making sure they're all at the same scale. This process is called overdrawing, where we draw right on top of the prints of our rough composition. I do this in order to make the final design choices on paper, and overdrawing lets us keep all the proportions. But you could also do your final artwork in Procreate or Photoshop, which is effectively the same thing as what I'm doing here. No matter how you render your final artwork, the process is usually the same. You take a rough composition and then make choices on top of that. You could do your roughing on the computer, clean that up on paper, and then scan it back into the computer, which is how I'm doing this design. But you can also start with a thumbnail drawing on paper, photograph that with an iPad, and finish your artwork in Procreate, or really any combination in between. I really don't think it matters what tools are used necessarily. What matters to me is having a solid way to rough out a design first, and then a comfortable and beautiful way to refine layers of detail on top of that. Another way we could have gotten the first shapes for the octopus is how we used to do it when I was first starting out in tattoo shops, and that was to paint the ideas right onto the client. We would then trace those shapes onto big sheets of tracing paper and use those tracings to create the final artwork at the correct scale. Later came digital cameras, and we would photograph those shapes instead and then create final compositions on the computer. And more recently, I've been painting on 3D models in Blender, because physically painting ideas on a client can be a bit messy and sometimes take hours. What I really want is a way to rapidly try out lots of ideas with very little time or material cost. But the main point is, all these techniques work, and it's worth learning all of them so you can choose the one that suits you best. So we're moving through the artwork and using our hardest pencil to do the main parts of our shading, and the softest pencil for the darkest parts. Then we're using the eraser to carve out shapes in negative space, and a huge component of all this is doing a final pass with the mechanical pencil to help focus and sharpen up areas of our shading. And I should point out that as I'm going back and forth over my drawing, I'm not finishing them up from top to bottom as I normally do, and as a result I'm making a huge mess on the paper by smudging the graphite. And this reminds me to get back on track and finish my drawings from top to bottom like I normally do. And after a few more details and finishing touches, we have our 3 pages of artwork complete. We get these back in the computer by scanning them at 600 dpi, but if you're using an iPad for your final artwork, you can just use the camera. Once we get these pages stacked on top of each other, I can go in and clean up the transitions from one page to the next. We then move the artwork over our blank, and I remember to change the shape of the octopus head and make it a little bigger so it better matches the length of the tentacles. And in order to check how our design might look as a tattoo, I make a copy of the artwork and then use the liquify tool to reshape the outside edges, making it look a little more like it's wrapping around the leg. And yeah, this can make things a little easier to visualize, and it's sometimes very helpful for the client. As a last-minute idea, something I saw in one of the references was an image where the tentacles were looking a bit darker and the suckers were a bit lighter, which made a nice contrast between these two elements. So I quickly paint on some shading and use my eraser to separate out the suckers, and the effect looks pretty good. The tentacles in this design could have been a real mess, but if you look closely, most of the tentacles in this top section flow in the same direction, and in this bottom section the flow is in this direction, and the two together create a nice S-curve. And in a design like this, where there will be lots of overlapping elements, the trick is to have the shapes overlap while traveling in a similar direction to each other, as opposed to overlapping at an angle closer to 90 degrees. The result is a greater feeling of organization and flow in the final design, because when you crisscross shapes, it tends to make the design feel more chaotic. And with that, we have the artwork and a presentation to show our client during the next consultation. And that is the first draft of the giant octopus tattoo design. Hey, if you got anything out of this, then help us out by hitting the like button. And subscribe to our channel, we come out with new videos often. And make sure to hit the bell icon so you don't miss out. And if you're serious about creating the best art possible for your tattoos, then go to tattoodesignschool.com and check out the masterclass. This is everything I wish I knew when I was first starting out, and it will push you to create artwork you didn't think was possible. This is the perfect investment in your tattoo career, so check out the masterclass at tattoodesignschool.com. But most importantly, share this video with the person you know who's interested in artwork and tattoos. And we'll see you in the next one.